Hello, Wake County employees. My name is David Ellis, and I'm one of Wake County's Deputy County Managers.
And I'm Regina Pettaway. I'm your Human Services Director.
As you are aware, Wake County Human Services has undergone an organizational assessment over the past few months. The organizational assessment looked at key elements within the organization. Those elements include employee morale, retention, trust, communication, and service integration.
Thank you, Wake County Human Services employees. We'd like to express our sincere gratitude to everyone who participated in this process so far. And I'd like to especially thank our staff ambassador team who helped guide us through this process. We had a phenomenal response rate so far. As you know, Wake County Human Services has over 1,500 employees. Over 1,300 of you completed the survey, which is almost a 90% response rate. And we had 24 focus groups. Over 200 employees participated in those focus groups. I want you to know that your input will be invaluable to us as we move forward to make Wake County Human Services a better place for us to work and also better for those that we serve.
However, the work does not end here today. We want to encourage each of you to stay involved. We want to encourage you to get your colleagues involved in this. We want to continue to make Wake County Human Services a better place to work.
Please stay tuned for a look at the organizational assessment results presented to you by the independent outside consulting firm, the Novak Group Consultants.
Well, thank you all very much for coming. It's a pleasure to be with you this afternoon. My name is Michelle Ferguson, and I have with me today my colleague, Haley Kadish. We are with the Novak Consulting Group, and we are part of the consulting team that was hired by the county to conduct the organizational assessment here in Human Services. And what we want to do today is share with you a little bit about the process that we went through, tell you more about the results of the process, and then also talk to you about what's going to be happening after today. And so for those of you who are familiar with this process, the purpose of this work was really to engage employees and learn about what are some of the opportunities for improvement to really help elevate employee engagement, employee morale, and overall employee satisfaction here in Human Services. Our team worked with a team within Human Services that helped guide our process over the last couple of months. And we had as the project sponsors, your director, Regina, and also the Deputy County Manager, David Ellis, served as one of the project sponsors. I think it's important to note that someone from the County Manager's office participated very actively in this process. Obviously, there are things that come out of this process that go beyond Human Services, and it's great to have someone from the County Manager's office really actively involved. We also worked very closely with a staff team. The staff team was comprised of representatives from all of the divisions across the department. You see their names listed there. The staff team was guided by Daryl Blevins from ERC and Yvonne Torres, one of the program managers in public health. And the staff team filled a very important role, or a couple of very important roles. First of all, they were really a sounding board to us throughout the process. They helped us in terms of reviewing the survey instrument. We talked about process with the focus groups, and they also really helped us in terms of developing ways to ensure engagement of the employees in this process. They also were very instrumental within the organization to answer questions that employees had about this process. And I think really as a direct result of the work that the staff team did, the online employee survey within Human Services received an 88% response rate. Our organization works with local governments across the country. We do surveys in a lot of different settings. And for an agency this size of 1,500 people almost, to have an 88% response rate is really significant. And we attribute that to the interest that employees had in having a voice in this process, and also to the direct work of the staff team to really encourage people to participate. So what I want to do now is talk a little bit about some of the key themes within the survey. You may remember, if you were part of that 88% who took the survey, that we asked you a series of questions that you could rate on a scale of from strongly agree to strongly disagree. And they were organized in a variety of different categories. You see the categories along the bottom line of the slide that you see in front of you now. And what we were able to do is take a look at the overall satisfaction rates for each of the categories. And what the results told us is customer service in particular ranks incredibly high here within human services. Employees that took the survey are very engaged in the work they do. They're very committed to providing very high levels of customer service, direct service to the clients and the customers and the patients that they serve. They also get a tremendous amount of satisfaction out of their individual jobs, and they feel very connected to the work in terms of how their work contributes to the mission, vision, and values of their work unit, as well as their division and the department to a degree as well. On the other end of the spectrum, if you would have asked us before we even stepped into the room or stepped into this project what categories we would expect to be on the lower end of the spectrum, the two that are at the lower end are ones that frankly were not necessarily a surprise to us. When you ask employees about compensation, that tends to receive lower marks anywhere we go. And in an agency this size, again, with 1,500 employees in multiple divisions spread across multiple departments, multiple locations, across the county, it's not a surprise that communication is a challenge. Now, just because those received low marks and they weren't a surprise to us, doesn't mean that they're not important. In fact, it means they're really important to take a look at, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. A couple other key themes of the survey. For those of you who took the survey, you may recall that we asked you several open-ended questions. One of those questions was, tell us what you believe the department does particularly well. What was very telling for us is that the answer to those questions, employees could have said anything. And 58% of the respondents mentioned something about customer service, quality service, and the variety of services that human services provides to the people that you serve. Again, really re-emphasizing that strong commitment to quality customer service within this agency. Employees, as I mentioned before, get a high level of personal satisfaction out of their jobs. They enjoy the work that they do, but many of them struggle with the work environment. In fact, 78% of respondents told us that they would recommend working for the department to a friend. You all know that referrals are incredibly strong, and in this case, it's a great mark that so many individuals in this department really would recommend working to the department to a friend. And yet, 40% of the respondents said that they're not excited about coming to work. And 1 in 3 respondents said that they're not satisfied with the overall work environment or the culture within which they work. That tells us that there's opportunities for improvement there. What employees also told us in the survey is that generally they have a very positive relationship with their supervisor and those within their work unit. As you kind of move outside or move up in the hierarchy, there's a little bit more of a disconnect that employees feel between themselves and their work unit and upper levels of management. Again, not a big surprise to us given the size of the organization. When you're an employee, you tend to operate or interact most closely with those within your work unit. And so there's a bit more of a disconnect as you move up layers of management within the agency. We also heard in the survey that employees are concerned about how discipline is handled, with nearly a third or over a third of employees indicating that they don't believe that discipline is handled in a fair and consistent manner, in particular as it relates to dealing with low performers throughout the organization. Employees also said in the survey that they really want to be more engaged in the decision-making process. It's important for them to be involved, to provide input into the decisions. In fact, over 59%, almost 60% of the respondents said they want to be involved in the decisions that impact them. And a very high mark, almost 50% of respondents said that they want to know more about how the rationale, the reasons, the whys behind why decisions are made. We also heard in the survey that employees are looking for more opportunities for professional growth and development. If you took the survey, you may recall too that we asked you to tell us what division you work for. And Based on that, we were able to look at the results given the divisions within the department. And what that tells us, as you can see on the screen, is that employees within Human Services have a different experience based on which division they work for. If you look at the slide, the 77% green line across the middle of the slide is the overall department average in terms of overall satisfaction. So for all of the survey respondents, an overall satisfaction rate of 77%. And you can see there, again, the different numbers associated with different divisions of the department. Again, it tells us a different experience based on your division. It also tells us that there may be things that are going on within public health or health clinics that could be best practices or lessons learned that may well be applied in other divisions of the department to really help elevate that overall satisfaction rate across the department. After we completed the survey, we had a tremendous amount of information, of data from the employees within the department. Unfortunately, though, a survey is one-dimensional, and we really wanted to have the opportunity to engage employees, small groups of employees, in different conversations to talk about the whys behind the survey results. And so over the course of a couple weeks in April, we held a series of focus groups. Employees were selected randomly to participate or invited to participate in a focus group. We had separate sessions for supervisors and separate sessions for non-supervisors. And we invited them in again to talk more specifically about some of those survey results. During the focus group process, we had over 200 individual participants, employees from the department, that came to talk with us in those sessions. And for those of you who may have participated in the sessions, you'll recall that there were two facilitators in each session. One of us was out there engaging in conversation and asking questions of the group, and the other member of our team who was there was literally typing and taking notes the entire time. We promised and assured employees that the conversations were confidential. We aggregated all of the comments that we received. The only way that we separated out the comments were based on those that came from the supervisor focus group sessions versus the non-supervisor focus group sessions. That way we could look at any different experiences that supervisors and non-supervisors have within the department. But as a result of those focus groups, we had over 3,000 individual comments that we received that we tracked and analyzed as part of this work. And so what I'd like to do now is talk a little bit about the results, the overall themes from the focus groups. Customer service. So at the beginning of each focus group session, we asked employees to go around and to introduce themselves, and we also asked them to share with us one of their best days working for Human Services. And I can tell you from my own experiences facilitating at least half of those sessions that the majority of the stories that we heard employees tell us about their best day involved direct service that they provided to one of their customers or their clients. And it really showed us and demonstrated the high level of commitment and passion that employees within Human Services have to providing high quality direct services to the people that they serve. We also talked in the focus groups about communication. You may recall from that earlier survey slide that communication rated relatively low on the survey. And so we asked employees, how do you want to be communicated with? And what we heard from employees is that when there are changes that impact their daily work, how they go about their day or how they go about their work, they want to hear that directly from their supervisor. They want the opportunity for their supervisor to have conversation with them so they can ask questions and learn more about the changes that are taking place. They also want that conversation followed up with something in writing so they can go back and refer to it in the future. We also heard in this agency that communication doesn't always flow all the way down to all levels within the department. When there is information or changes that are communicated really from the upper levels within the department, it doesn't always flow all the way down to all employees. And if it does, it often doesn't happen in a timely way. We heard lots of stories of employees telling us about policy changes that impacted their work that they didn't learn about until after the policy change went into effect. And therefore, they were playing catch up. And that's a frustrating place to be in. We also talked a lot in the focus groups about accountability and supervisors. And just as I said earlier, that employees in this department have a different experience based on their division, they also have a different experience based on the relationship they have with their supervisor. We asked employees to talk about what does good accountability look like? How do you want to be held accountable? And what makes for a great supervisor? And we heard stories from employees who talked about a great supervisor being someone who rolls up their sleeves and gets in the trenches with employees, particularly when workload is high or times are tough, and a good supervisor helps their group get through those difficult times. A good supervisor, employees told us, is also someone who holds employees accountable for clearly established expectations. A good supervisor, they told us, is someone who also holds people accountable when they are not performing in the same way that others in the work unit are performing. So holds those low performers accountable for the same expectations. A good supervisor is also someone who has an open door policy, so employees can come to him or her with questions or issues or challenges that they're facing, and the employee doesn't fear any negative consequence. So we heard those great positive stories that employees have and experiences they have with their supervisors, and we also heard the opposite side. We heard from employees those who have a more strained or challenging relationships with their supervisors, who don't provide that open environment, and certainly that impacts how those employees experience the workplace. We talked a little bit more too about productivity, and we asked employees to tell us what causes them to be less productive in the workplace. We heard stories of technology being an obstacle. We heard stories of computers not working, printers not working, voicemail not actually taking voicemail. We also heard a lot about NC Fast and other major systems that employees here utilize not being up as readily as it needs to be, and those being some of the obstacles to productivity. And then also that culture of negativity that I mentioned earlier, especially when there are strained relationships with supervisors, really does hamper an employee's ability to be productive in this department. We also talked in the focus groups about professional development. And what employees told us is that they are committed to staying here within Human Services, but they really want opportunities for advancement. But they want to stay here within Human Services. They're not looking to move to another department of the county or even to leave Wake County, but they want to have opportunities to better themselves and better their own careers here within Human Services. So after the focus groups then, we have a tremendous amount of data from the survey. We have over 3,000 comments from the focus groups. And what we really wanted to do then was to identify what are the unique drivers of employee satisfaction here within Wake County Human Services. And so we spent some time doing a key driver analysis, which is really an in-depth statistical evaluation of the results of the survey to identify those unique drivers of employee satisfaction and morale here within Wake County. We took those drivers along with all of the themes from the focus groups, and that yielded 8 key focus areas for Human Services. And it's important to note that these 8 areas come directly from the information that employees shared through the survey and through the focus groups. So I'll walk through each of the 8 areas now, and I should note these are not in priority order, but they are all equally important. First on the list is prioritizing customer service. You may recall from the earlier slide from the survey that customer service ranked really high in this department, 89% satisfaction rate. People here are very passionate about the service they provide. What we know from the statistical analysis is that if that commitment to customer service doesn't continue, that it will have a negative impact on employee morale. Second on the list there, ensuring consistent communication. I mentioned already that it's a challenge to provide consistent, timely communication in a large agency, and yet it is critical that employees here have the access to the information they need to do the jobs they've been asked to do. Engaging employees in decision-making is the next one. What employees told us is that they don't want to be the ones making the decisions, but they want to have input into that decision-making process. They believe that because of their experience doing the work directly, that they have information and knowledge that should be shared with the decision makers so that those decisions can be made from a place of being fully informed of the implications, both positive and negative. And so employees really want to be engaged and asked to provide input into the decision-making process. Equipping supervisors is the next key focus area. I mentioned before about the challenges that supervisors have in developing positive relationships with some of their employees. And we had some very open and honest conversations in the focus groups, particularly from supervisors themselves, who had said they have been in the organization for a long time and were promoted into supervisory positions, but weren't provided the tools and the support necessary to be quality supervisors. And so there's a real opportunity for the organization to set supervisors up for success so they can manage their work units, both their employees as well as the work assigned to them, in a positive way. Also on the list, creating opportunities for professional development. What we heard from employees in the focus groups is that one of the major obstacles to going to training, to attending training sessions that are openly and readily available to them, is time. What we heard employees tell us is that funding is available. It's not a question of money. It really is a question of time. Often employees don't get the approval from their supervisors to go to training, or if they do, employees are very concerned because there's a line of clients that they need to see that only grows when they go away for a few hours or a day to training. And they often feel that it creates an extra burden on their coworkers who are also heavily burdened with workload. And as a result, employees simply just don't take part in training that's offered to them. Recognizing and appreciating employees is the next one. It's interesting when we often hear stories about, we did hear stories from employees about little things that the county used to do for employees that seem to have gone away over time, particularly post-recession as the budgets got a little bit tighter. Things like water bottles or pens or even employee picnics that many people probably took for granted at the time, but now that they're gone, they're really missed. And what employees told us is they may have been small, both monetarily and physically small things, and yet they really indicated to employees that the organization cared about them and recognized that particularly in times of stress or high workload or transition, that they were making an extra effort. And so identifying opportunities to recognize and to show appreciation for employees is another key focus area. Enhancing technology. I mentioned earlier about some of the basic as well as the systemic technology issues that really do impact productivity, another key focus area for the agency. And then finally, addressing compensation and performance management. In the focus groups, we had a lot of conversation about PDMS. And clearly employees are very frustrated with that system. What they told us is that they don't understand how their individual performance links to their PDMS score and how that PDMS score links to a pay increase. And it's confusing to employees when they see that another employee in some other area has the same PDMS score that they do, and yet they get a different increase level. And so creating a system that is transparent, that's easy for employees to understand, is another key focus area. So after these 8 areas were developed, we spent some time a couple of weeks ago with the staff team that I mentioned at the beginning. And we asked the staff team to think about and begin to brainstorm what were some key initiatives that the agency could implement that would have a positive impact on employee satisfaction in each of those 8 areas. We gave the staff team some of the specific data from the focus groups and the surveys to help inform their discussion. And I want to share with you now some of the brainstormed ideas that the staff team came up with. These are not set in stone, these were just ideas as they were being creative and thinking about what the county, what the department should do to help really improve overall employee morale and satisfaction. The staff team, talked about some communication strategies, such as initiating a director's blog that would be a way of disseminating information and messages directly from your director. They also talked about developing some set plans for when policy changes occur that would be universal across the department. So anytime there was a policy change, an employee would know where to go for information and what that process was going to look like to ensure some more consistency in that process. Annual training for supervisors was another idea they had. They also suggested perhaps opening a portion of the SMT meetings for employees to come to so they could hear what's being talked about at leadership and management levels in the department and perhaps provide input on certain topic areas. And then finally, they talked about employee recognition things like reinstating the annual employee picnic. So at this point, we have the 8 key focus areas, and we're getting ready really to sunset phase 1 and begin phase 2 of this process. And what we've done now is have those 8 key focus areas back to the department. And what the leadership team is doing right now is beginning the process of establishing an implementation team for each of these 8 key focus areas. And that's really where all of you come in. You have the opportunity, if you so choose, to be part of one of those implementation teams. There will be a senior management team member who's assigned to be a co-leader of each of the 8 teams. And perhaps one of you may be interested in being a co-leader on one of those teams with a member of the senior management team. And so we do have some interest forms that you're welcome to sign up for, to write your name on. If you're interested, as you heard those 8 key focus areas, if one of them resonated with you, if you feel very strongly about one of those 8 areas, then I encourage you to sign your name on the form, and when those teams are established, the member of the senior management team who's assigned to that team will contact you, and you get to learn more about what those teams are going to look like and what their schedule is and what the process is. The idea of those implementation teams is really to spend time developing a work plan for improving employee satisfaction in each of those areas with specific and actionable initiatives that the department can take on over the course of the coming months, and in fact maybe even years. Some of these things will be a much longer time frame than others. So in addition to establishing these implementation teams, the department is also getting ready to embark on a strategic planning process. This organizational assessment is very inwardly focused on the employees within the organization. The strategic plan will have a much broader focus, but certainly the work of these implementation teams will be a very critical piece of the overall strategic plan. And I encourage you to stay informed and stay involved either through the implementation teams or the strategic planning process so that you can be informed and be involved in the decisions that impact you.